go, Franco. What is this bullshit? Yeah. No, side chest, not front chest, Franco, side. Yeah, this thing's changed a little bit when we go to the side. Hey, look, Franco, what you have to do is when I say side chest, then hit the side chest and then it come out. And if you don't have it, don't hit it. No, don't hit it. Don't hit it.
Hey YouTube, there you go, you heard it from the Arnold himself. I have a new bodybuilding video for you, and this one's going to be all about the side chest pose. Hey guys, what's up? The Tominator here, continuing off with my series, The Best Poses of All Time. So this one's going to be featuring the best side chest poses ever. And same as the last two videos, we're going to stick with that format of no particular order, but at the end I will give you my top overall pick for who hits this pose the best. And yeah, let's jump into it. First up we got Atwood. This guy just looks like a crazy tank in this pose. Very thickly developed everywhere. Very good pec development. You can see it here in some better lighting. That he's just an absolute beast. And we got another similar kind of guy in Tom Prince. And holy hamstring sweep, man. That's some of the craziest hamstring sweep I've ever seen in my life. Could be of all time. And if I ever make a best body parts video, he's going to be high up on that list of best hamstrings for sure. So Tom Prince. We got Bertil Fox. This guy was a beast from the 80s. And one of his best poses, he had some of the best pec development of his day. Definitely has that 80s vintage look to him in this pose. And here he is next to Lee Haney. Pretty close pec-wise, but look at the arm difference between Bertil and Lee. I believe this was the 83 Mr. Olympia, or somewhere around there. It might have been 84, but there's no way that Lee should be beating Bertil, and I'm pretty sure he did. Well, it's tough to say because from one pose alone, but Bertil's crushing him in this side chest pose, no question about it. But, you know, we got to let Lee make his case too, because he had some of the best pec development of his time, and he was pretty solid in this pose as well. So here he is next to his eventual successor in Dorian Yates. At this point, I'd say Lee's beating him in this pose pretty handily. But, you know, Dorian was never my favorite in the side chest pose. I always felt his chest looks a little bit funny in this position. You can see it just looks completely asymmetrical. It looks kind of like it caves in the middle a little bit. But nonetheless, you know, I was able to find some pretty impressive pictures of Dorian hitting this pose. So, good enough to make the list. I got a lot of pictures of Yates here. But we got another guy with similar kind of attributes to Dorian in terms of the graininess, in terms of the density of the muscle, the granitiness of it, in Branch Warren. So Branch back in his day, he did look really impressive in this pose. Certainly not the most pleasing sight to the eyes. He's definitely not aesthetic, but he can still, you know, appreciate the kind of just grainy muscularity that he's got going here, right? Really good pec development too. And then we got, if you talk about pec development, you got to mention this guy, Johnny Jackson, Branch's longtime friend and training partner. These guys train in Metroflex Gym in Texas all the time. Same gym as Ronnie Coleman, or as Ronnie used to. I guess Ronnie probably has his own personal gym at this point. I remember I saw him training for the 2006 Mr. Olympia in his own personal gym. So Ronnie's moved up in the world, but I think these guys are still probably training at Metroflex. Nothing wrong with that though, man. Hardcore training. So Johnny Jackson, some of the best pec development ever. It doesn't really shine through necessarily as much as it should in this pose, but you can also note the crazy trap development on this guy too. He had some absolutely freaky body parts. We got Brandon Currie once again. Again, you know, a guy that I just feel he has a solid overall package in terms of the shape, the structure, the symmetry. He just really needs to hone in his conditioning, maybe bring up his overall mass a little bit, because he looks great on his own, but he looks a little bit small next to some of the bigger guys. We got Cederick Mcmillian. A lot of names are coming up again and again because certain guys, you know, they're just undeniably superior bodybuilders to others, right? So Cedric, I featured in I believe both my past two videos as well. Same with Brandon Currie, because I like to reward guys with aesthetics, and these are some of the most aesthetic guys going today. We got Chris Cormier. Once again, another solid performer. Some of the best pecs of all time, I'd say. If he had one standout body part, it was his pecs for sure, because he didn't really have too much in the way of like freaky body parts or standout features, but pecs would definitely be probably his greatest strength. Here he is next to Ronnie and Gunter on the left. That's Gunter Schlierkamp. And Gunter looks great in this pose. I'd probably give him, if we were just to compare this one picture here, I'd probably give Gunter the win here. And believe it or not, Ronnie would probably be last because I just don't think he's hitting the pose effectively here. But more of Gunter. We'll get to Ronnie later. Now, Gunter's a tall guy. I think he's like 6'2", 6'3". He's reminiscent of Arnold in that sense because he has really good pec development and good biceps too. So he's kind of in some ways like a modern-day Arnold. Not on that level, I don't think. He never made an impact like Arnold did, and I don't think he's nearly as good of an overall bodybuilder. Even though if you stood Arnold next to this guy today, Arnold would lose because of his lagging legs, right? But anyway, I'm not going to tarnish Oak's legacy. We got Dennis James. Now, you got to take these pictures with a grain of salt because this is obviously like a photo shoot. They can make anything look good with proper lighting and stuff. They probably airbrush the shit out of it. But he looks like Mr. Olympia still. He looks so crazily impressive in these pictures here. But, that's the thing with Dennis James is he looks great outside the gym, but you put him on stage and he just kind of wilts. So these pictures, yes, he made this list because he looks so outstanding in these photos, but these are kind of like an asterisk because I wasn't able to find any really good pictures of him hitting the pose actually in competition. But this guy can. Dexter Jackson's been doing it year after year after year, and I feel like this is probably one of his strongest poses. And I think he said it himself that he's one of the best guys to ever hit the pose. It was either that or he was saying this was his strongest pose. I can't remember what he said exactly, but either way, he's probably right. And what I like so much about him in this pose is look at the awesome separation between his delt and his arm. And also the side of the leg looks great too, but that delt, man, whew, it's crazy. Sean Ray, another shorter guy with crazy aesthetics and very full development. And wasn't able to find too many pictures of Sean in this pose, unfortunately, but I feel like these couple that I'm showing you here are enough for him to make the list. This one's a little blurry. It was taken from a video from 1999, Mr. Olympia. I have a full video featuring his posing routine on my channel, so check that one out. He's really impressive here. We got Franco Columbu, one of the best guys to hit this pose back in the 70s. There was actually quite a few from that era. There wasn't, you might have noticed kind of an omission of old school bodybuilders in my last video of the best lat spreads of all time. That's because I feel like those guys weren't really the best at hitting the pose. They didn't have enough maybe mass through the lats, or it could have been bad lighting. I don't know what it was, but just on the whole, they didn't really look that great in that pose. But when it comes to the side chest, there's a lot of dudes from that era who had really good pec development, and I feel like these guys just kind of hit the pose in a different way, maybe a little bit more effective, the way that they kind of puffed up their chest and made it stand out a little bit more. But Franco was noted for the split in his pecs between his upper and lower. You can see it clearly here. It's very impressive. Even here, you can kind of note it in the far pec there, the split. So he was really good in this pose. Here he is next to, I think that's Danny Padilla on the left, and then Tom Platz on his right. And Tom Platz was surprisingly good in this pose too. I didn't expect to see him on this list because he's more noted for his legs and his lower body as opposed to his pec development. But he hits the pose pretty well, I gotta say. We got Lou Ferrigno and another old school bodybuilder who makes this list. You can see some amazing pec development on this guy. And yeah, a lot of old school bodybuilders on this list. We got Matt Mendenhall. I'm not even sure who he's standing next to. I forget who that was, but he looks pretty solid as well. We got Gary Stridham. This is one of the guys with the best pec development from the 80s. And I'd say he was definitely hanging with Haney in this pose. We'll see in a second, but really good delts on the guy too. You can notice that here. he was great from the front poses, but when he turned around, Haney completely crushed him with his superior back development. Jay Cutler, so another solid pose for Jay. He has such tremendous width through his shoulders and his chest that he's gonna, really stand out in poses like this. And he was able to showcase it properly because he really turned forwards a little bit more than most guys do to highlight that width. And anytime they do this variation of the side chest, Jay was really strong in this one. Because when guys hit it like this, they usually do turn forward a little bit more. And for Jay, that's going to bode well. Here he is looking like a beast. But note the guy on his left. That's, let me get that out of the way. Mustafa Mohammed. He's looking great in this pose too. So here's another picture of him. Really good for a shorter guy. Crazy, thick development. We got Juan Morel. This guy is competing today. He's relatively new. And he looks great in this pose. Look at the thickness of the chest there. That's really outstanding. So I had to throw him in here too. I don't really think he's the best overall, but in this pose, he looks great. Here he is next to Victor Martinez. And we got to feature Victor more because back in his day, he was one of the best to ever hit this pose, I feel. So this was probably, I think this was 07. I can kind of tell by the background there. But also by Victor's crazy condition. And look at this one. Obviously, this is like a poster for the Olympia, so they're going to, we got to take pictures like these with a grain of salt, obviously. But he looks absolutely Mr. Olympia material right here. And, he was in his prime. This was one of his best poses for sure. Here he is again in 07. Just world class. We got another Victor, though, Victor Richards. He was one of the biggest guys from the 90s. Never formally competed, I don't think. I wish he would have, because he had the potential to do some real damage at the Olympia level. We got Mike Ashley. So you can kind of note patterns in this pose. You can kind of discern roughly which decade they're from just by the way that they look and the way that they hit it. So Mike Ashley here definitely looks like late 80s, early 90s, and that's probably what he is. I'd say probably late 80s, but it might be early 90s, I don't know. He's got that kind of quality to his physique, though. The 70s guys, they all kind of puff up their chest more. And then the, 2000s and on, they kind of turn more, like what Jay was doing, a little bit more to the front for the most part. Just little trends like that. And we got Kai Green. So Kai, I've never personally liked him very much in this pose because, when you look at individual body parts, if you look at his legs in isolation, you look at his arms on their own or his pecs, everything looks crazy thickly developed and stuff. But when you look at the whole package overall, he just looks a little bit awkward in this pose. It looks kind of unnatural, the way the angle of his torso to his legs, and I don't like how you can see his leg in the back, his second leg in the background there. It just looks a little bit weird to me. But I can definitely see why people appreciate him in this pose and why they think he's one of the best to hit it these days. Because, he is kind of freaky and he does have crazy development and some crazy body parts. But for me personally, I just don't really think he's very aesthetic, and I really don't personally like him that much in this pose. But like I said, I can see why people think he's one of the best. Here's a comparison of him over the years. We got him next to Phil. I think this is actually one of Kai's better pictures of the side chest pose here. Looks a little bit more natural to me. It doesn't have that weird angle in his upper body leaning forward so much. And of course we're going to feature Phil. Now I've kind of knocked Phil and critiqued him on this pose. In my comparison with Roelly Winklaar, I said, I kind of question why would people say this is one of Phil's strongest poses. I had Roelly beating him in that comparison. But, maybe I was a little bit harsh. I am kind of backing off on my criticism there a little bit, but I still don't think it's one of his strongest poses. I still think he's better in the back double bicep, the most muscular for sure. I'd even say his rear lat spread is more of a standout pose for him than this one. So this for me is kind of middle of the road for Heath. That said, he still is one of the best guys today to hit this pose. There's no question about that. I won't deny that. So, and you can definitely find photos of him like this one here, where he's hitting it really outstandingly. Like, I can't really pick apart much here. There's nothing really wrong about this. Everything looks good. So he definitely had to make the list. But I still don't feel it's one of his strongest poses. I wouldn't say that for sure, because he's got better poses. And here's a comparison from 2011 to 2013. You can notice the discernible difference in the quad size, right? The quad and the hamstring there. Even the arms, the delts, pretty much everything's bigger in that 2-year span. He put on some size, right? We got Chris Dim, and holy tricep sweep, man. This guy's like the Tom Prince of triceps, apparently, because he's got crazy sweep there in his arm. And that's why I had to include him in this list. He's kind of a little-known guy from the early 2000s, I think he was competing. And I don't know what happened. I think something happened to him. He got in an accident or a training incident or something, because when I was Googling his name, I found a bunch of articles and pictures of him in like a wheelchair. I'm not sure if he's paralyzed or something or what happened to him. So if you know any more details about that, please share in the comments, because I'd like to hear it. We got the 50 Cent of bodybuilding, aka Lionel Bayecki, and he does kind of look like that, right? Like if you put like a hat and a bandana on this dude, it's like 50 Cent on steroids. That was one of the commentators was mentioning that, and probably his Olympia debut, that he looks like 50 Cent. But he also looks really impressive in this pose and many others. He has great shape and structure, symmetry. So, in my opinion, one of the most aesthetic guys going today. So, got to throw him in here. We got Nasser Al-Somebody. And again, with Nasser, it was hard to find pictures of him hitting this pose well. But when I did find pictures of him actually hitting it properly, in good lighting and good angles and stuff, he looks great. So, yes, excuse the crappy quality of this photo, but this was one of the better ones I could find of him really nailing the pose. And you can see why I included him on this list, right? But we got Paul Delet. And this guy, what an absolute freak. Look at the vascularity through the chest. Look at the thickness and density of the muscle. Here he is next to a young Ronnie Coleman. And Vince Taylor on the right. Vince, nothing special in this pose, so he's not on the list. But yeah, you can see Paul Delet at this point dwarfing Ronnie. And that wouldn't go on for very much longer, because Ronnie turned into a monster in his own right, as we all know. Here he is again next to Vince Taylor. And when Paul could actually hit a pose, he looked really amazing. The problem with him was his posing, right? So if he could have posed better, he would have placed much higher, and there's no doubt. But here, talk about a freak show. We got Paul Delet on the left, and we got Marcus Ruhl, an even bigger freak on the right. Probably the freakiest bodybuilder of all time. But when he was hitting this pose effectively, he had just such tremendous pec and delt development, and look at the bicep peak as well. So he was a scary sight when he really nailed this shot here, like here in this competition, the 2002 Night of Champions. He kind of managed to make every single pose, it seems, a most muscular variation. Here, this almost looks like it could be a hands clasped most muscular. And he did the same thing in the last video with the lat spread even, just truly a genetic freak, or not even genetic, more like a mutant lab experiment gone wrong. Because Marcus was the freak of freaks, in my opinion. But we got him next to another mass monster in Big Ramy. This is an interesting comparison, two of the biggest guys ever. And Ramy definitely makes the list. Like in this pose here, I think he looks even better than Phil, honestly. Phil might have more detail than him for sure. But I just like the way Ramy's hitting the pose. I like his proportions and his structure in this shot more than Phil's, because he has more width through the chest, right? So I always think that's going to bode well for you when you're showcasing the chest, right? You want to have a thicker, wider chest, not a narrow, scrunched up one. So Ramy, I feel like when he's hitting this pose effectively, he's easily one of the best guys to do it today. But we're going to take it back a little bit to the old school days with Robbie Robinson. The more I see of this guy, the more he's quickly becoming one of my favorite bodybuilders from the 70s. Because he was very aesthetic, had great shape, and looked really solid in a lot of poses. So he's making the list again here with the side chest. We got Roelly Winklaar. And this guy's a beast in this pose. You know, he doesn't have one of the best chests, but the delts on the arms kind of make up for it. He's kind of in some senses like a Kevin Levrone because, you know, again with Levrone, it's more about the delts and the triceps and stuff than the pecs in this pose. But it works for them, right? They still, overall, it looks crazy. It's very impressive to me. Look at the detail on the hamstring and the calves here too. To me, this is better than any pictures that we just saw of Phil. And I did say that in my comparison video of Roelly and Phil, that I thought Roelly was beating him in that pose. And a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but some people in the comments were calling me out on that, saying I was drunk and shit. So I don't know. You tell me. To me, I like Roelly more in this pose overall than Phil. But, you know, this isn't a comparison video. I'm just kind of showcasing some of the best guys to hit the pose, so I'm not going to really dive into that again. But Roelly, for me, looks great in this pose. That's why I got so many pictures of him, too, because he looks consistently good in it, unlike Phil. Had to throw that in there again. So we got Ronald Matz, and you know, when I was doing my searching, Google's got ADD. So you Google one guy's name and it shows you a bunch of random dudes, and that's how I came across this guy because I never heard of him before, but had to include him after seeing these couple of pictures because he looks really good. He's got to be in that early '80s vintage. I'm not sure exactly, maybe even mid '80s, but not sure when he was from. Let me know in the comments if you know more about him. But of course, we got the Wolf. This is one of his best poses for sure. Because like Jay Cutler, he has that phenomenal width through the delts, right? And he kind of highlights that by twisting forwards a little bit more. And again, this is what I was talking about in this variation with the hands turned down. It really suits guys with wider frames, like him and Jay can really nail this pose. And here we go in 2013, him next to Phil and Kai. And you know what? I probably would give this pose to Dennis. Because Kai's got like a beach ball of a belly, and he's not doing a very good job hiding it. And Phil looks kind of small next to both these giants. So for my money, Dennis is the best in this particular comparison here. But we got Samir Banu. And like Robbie Robinson, this is a guy I'm quickly becoming more and more of a fan of. The more pictures I see of this guy, the more impressed I am. The more I'm like, how did I ever like overlook him and not really pay much attention to him back in the day? Because I wasn't following bodybuilding back in '83. I was born in '87, so when this guy was winning the Olympia, I was not here, and I didn't really get into bodybuilding until 2000-ish. So I never really went back and explored much of this guy's photos, but he looks really good in a lot of poses, and he had tremendous back development too. We'll see that coming up in the next couple of videos. Here he is next to his eventual successor, Lee Haney. Albert Beckles. So somebody pointed out to me in the best front double bicep pose video that this guy should have made the list, and when I went back and checked it out, you are right. I can't remember who made that comment, but I did forget about Albert Beckles in the front double bicep, because you can find some really impressive shots of him hitting that. But, I'm going to throw him in here, and not just because, like, to compensate for the fact I didn't include him in that video, because he does deserve to make the best side chest video, too. He had a really good side chest for his time. There he is next to Ed Corney. So this would have been probably, like, early 70s, maybe even late 60s, somewhere in there, I think. We got Rory Calendar, another old-school bodybuilder with really good pec development, looked pretty stellar in the side chest. He kind of looks like Sergio Oliva's era. This might even be like late 60s. If you guys know like the precise years that some of these pictures are taken from, because I don't, that'd be really interesting to hear in the comments. Here he is again. Very reminiscent of Oliva in this pose, I think. And we'll see that in a second. But we got Serge Nubret. This guy is probably my favorite old school bodybuilder because he had perfect shape. This is aesthetics to rival Flex Wheeler, maybe even better than Flex because he's more human looking. You know what I'm saying? But look at the shape. Look at the pec development. Look at the delts, the arms, even the traps look aesthetic. And traps aren't usually a muscle that is noted for being aesthetic, right? But Serge made it so. And yeah, he's really a remarkable sight. You could find a lot of photos of him actually hitting this pose. But even when he hits the pose, it doesn't even look like he's flexing so much. He's just kind of holding his arms there. Like, I don't see any striations in his chest. I don't really think he's really flexing that hard. Everything was kind of just relaxed with this dude. I mean, it was a different time. Maybe it wasn't expected that they're tensing the muscle to the max back then. But here he is next to Franco and Arnold. And what a picture, right? This is going in straight to the Bodybuilding Hall of Fame. Here we got Sergio Oliva, though. This guy was like the mass monster of his time. You know, he would have been like the big Ramy of his day because he was just destroying people with his impressive size. A real genetic freak. You know, it took Arnold to finally dethrone the guy, and I think Arnold probably only beat him because he worked harder. He was more meticulous with his posing. Sergio was kind of lazy in that regard. I'm not sure what Sergio's training or nutritional habits were like, but Arnold he really put in the time and effort and the strategy to take on a genetically superior bodybuilder, let's face it. Arnold was great genetically as well, but Sergio was better. So Arnold just kind of outworked him. Not to knock Arnold, though, because, man, he has probably the best chest of all time. You can see it right there, Franco Myron. Ooh, shit, man. He's jelly. And if this was just a best chest video, like we're just talking about the chest alone, Arnold would win, probably, because look at the pec development. That, like, back here, this is probably, he's got to be no older than 20, 21. He might only be 19 here, and look at the chest already. And the way he hit it, the way he kind of like puffed up his rib cage, you could really, the chest just popped out at you. This is like that 3D effect that everyone's always talking about with Phil, and we see it in Arnold's pecs here. And yeah, probably the best, I would say, hands down, of all the old school bodybuilders to hit this pose, and there were quite a few of them, as we just saw. So it's not like he didn't have any competition. He was just better, and you can see crazy striations here. Just some of the best pec development of all time, hands down. Here we got, I'm not sure, I forget who the guy on the left is, but that's a young Lou Ferrigno there in the middle next to Monopoly Man, a.k.a. Joe Weider. And we got Arnold on the right, of course. But, you know, as good as Arnold was, this isn't just about the chest. This is about the side chest pose. So that incorporates other body parts, you know, the delts, the legs. And Ronnie's got legs in spades here. Look at him in this pose. He's pretty much perfect. So Ronnie is my top overall pick, needless to say, because when he really nailed the pose, it was game over for everybody. Like here, what a complete beast. This might even be like, I don't even know if this is competition. He looks a little bit lacking in definition here. It might be like a guest pose, but he doesn't even need condition. When you have size and when you look like this much of a beast in this pose, you're still going to win. So, you know, when Ronnie really hit the pose well, he was the best ever. Here he is completely annihilating Phil Heath. Again, not that Phil looks bad. I'm not trying to like bash on Phil this video, but Ronnie's just on like a whole other level. He's like from another world here, whereas Phil is a mere mortal in comparison. So look at the quads and the hams, the glutes too, like the lower body even. But the upper body's like he's just completely unstoppable when he hits it well. Even kneeling looks good. Here he is next to Jay and Dexter. Also two guys who made the list who are extremely gifted in this pose, but, you know, and Jay does look pretty impressive with that extra width there, but Ronnie, look at the thickness of his chest. It's just overwhelming. But that said, my other number one pick is Kevin Levrone. So I do have like a two-way tie here. I honestly just couldn't decide at the end of the day which one of these guys should take the cake, because on the one hand, Ronnie, when he hits the pose well, he's unbeatable, but he doesn't always hit it that great. He doesn't hit it to maximum effectiveness. And Levrone pretty much did. He was much more consistent in this pose. He was a better poser than Ronnie, like no question about it. Not that Ronnie was terrible at posing, but it just wasn't his strength. He wasn't like a Paul Delet shaking out there like a leaf, but he didn't know how to maximize his potential in terms of his physique as much as guys like Levrone and you know Sean Ray and other some of the best posers, right? So and Levrone pretty much always looked good in this pose. So I really couldn't decide at the end of the day. So here's a comparison. Like, yes, you can note the thickness of Ronnie's pecs is like probably double of Levrone's. Even his delts look bigger, which Levrone has some of the best delt development of all time, arguably the best shoulders ever. So that's saying something. And the legs too, but I just like the way Levrone's hitting it more. He's like Ronnie, you can see a little bit more distension in his belly. He's not turning, he's not opening enough here. And it wasn't just like an off picture here. You can see it again here. He often hit it this way, and he's not really showcasing his chest to his best, I think, whereas Levrone is, right? So that's why I think because of the posing, it kind of propels Levrone ahead, and he just squeaks into that top overall spot with Ronnie. So that's why I have them sharing the lead. Here again, I think Levrone's hitting the pose better, even though you could make an argument when you really look into it, you can notice some definite thickness advantage through the chest and even the shoulders with Ronnie, and the legs, of course. But I just feel like Levrone hits the pose better more times than not. That's why he shares the lead with Ronnie. Not to mention, the back poses are coming up, so Ronnie's going to have plenty of time to shine. And yeah, I had to give some props to the Maryland Muscle Machine because this is his best pose, I think. Anyway, that's it for the video. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my kind of cheating to a tie of a #1 pick. Let me know if I missed anybody once again. And next time we're going to be talking about the best back double bicep. But until then, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.